Hi everyone, here at the Australian Armour and Artillery Museum, and this is footage taken during AusArmourFest 2024. We're taking a look today at a piece of British armour from World War II. This is the Archer Self Propelled 17-pounder anti-tank gun. Now, as the planned invasion of Normandy, which was slated for mid-1944, approached, British armoured and anti-tank units became concerned about the capability of the main guns of their vehicles and on their towed artillery to engage the increasingly heavy German tanks that were being employed in North Africa and on the Eastern Front. Vehicles such as the Tiger I and the Panther were armoured more heavily than it was thought that their standard anti-tank armaments could cope with. The sorts of guns that were mounted on vehicles of the British Army and as towed anti-tank guns included the 6-pounder or 57mm anti-tank gun, the 75mm M3 gun that was on the Shermans that the British were using under Lend-Lease, and which equipped many British tank units, and the QF 75mm that was mounted onto the Cromwell and Churchill tanks. Now, the replacement anti-tank gun for the 6-pounder had been in development since November 1940 and resulted in the QF 17-pounder, a 76.2mm anti-tank gun. It was a highly capable gun and would be able to deal more readily with the heavier armoured German vehicles. However, weighing in at over 3 tons when mounted on a carriage, it was hardly a mobile or handy solution. So manufacture of these 17-pounder guns started in April 1942, and carriage-mounted weapons were rapidly deployed to North Africa in October of that year, and they're also used in 1943 during the invasion of Italy. Clearly, however, getting this gun mounted onto a tank was a priority, but it stubbornly refused to cooperate with any of the attempts, failing to be compatible with the planned future cruiser tanks like the Cromwell program. Consequently, less elegant solutions were sought, and the 17-pounder found its way into a number of vehicles in less than ideal implementations, such as the Sherman Firefly, which required a heavily modified 75mm Sherman turret to accommodate the 17-pounder, and the A30 Challenger, which was based on the Cromwell chassis but needed a unique turret. It was also employed in the Achillies IC and IIc conversions of the US M10 tank destroyer. A further example of an attempt to place the 17-pounder on a mobile platform was the vehicle which we see here, which is the self-propelled 17-pounder Valentine Mk I, or Archer. Now, the chassis of this vehicle was designed and built by Vickers Armstrong and had been in production since 1940. And it was chosen as the self-propelled mount because it was obsolescent but in production, and was one of the few chassis that could accommodate such a large gun. It was known to be a reliable and stable gun platform, but due to the long length of the gun, which was 4.19 meters in barrel length or 55 calibers, it was decided to mount it in an open casemate pointing over the rear deck of the Valentine chassis to prevent the final design from being too nose heavy and avoid the gun having excessive frontal overhang. So the old driver's position and turret ring of the Valentine were united to make a combined driving and gun serving area, and despite the unconventional layout with the driver seated facing to the rear of the casemate, the vehicle was well balanced and had quite a low silhouette. Now you can see here the chassis of the Archer. So this was based, as I said, on the Valentine tank. So you've got 2 sets of bogies, one forward, one rear, and the leading and trailing wheels are of a larger diameter, and the 2 smaller wheels are independently sprung and can move relative to that larger wheel. And so again, this was the chassis which was used on the Valentine tank. Now, the first prototype of the Archer was completed in early 1943, with firing trials carried out in April of that year, and Vickers were given order for 800 vehicles in about the middle of 1943. Ultimately, only about 655 units were produced, however. So all these vehicles were made by Vickers Armstrong. Now, the gun itself, the 17-pounder, is considered to be one of the best Allied anti-tank guns of the war, surpassing the 76mm M1 gun that was mounted in late war Shermans and the 90mm M3 mounted onto the M36 Jackson and the M26 Pershing. Its AP and AP capped ballistic capped rounds had a muzzle velocity and energy which was equivalent to the 8.8cm Kampfwagen Canona 36 L56, which was mounted to the Tiger I, and it could penetrate 150mm of 90-degree armour at 1,000 metres range, so it could deal with the frontal hull of the Tiger I from a kilometre away. Armour on this vehicle was kept low. It was between 14 and 16mm, and that was in line with the mass targets that enabled higher speed movement per the sort of self-propelled gun usage profile. The casemate of the vehicle around the gun is mostly 20mm in thickness. Now, moving here towards what would have been the rear of the Valentine chassis, you've got some stowage cases. You can see the exhaust there, which has been redirected towards the front of the vehicle. And here you've got what would have been the engine deck. Now, in here you've got a GMC 671 inline diesel, a 6-cylinder, 6.9 litre 2-stroke, developing about 141 kilowatts. Being a British vehicle from World War II, as with most British designs at that time, you've got a rear drive sprocket and a front idle wheel. Now, the vehicle was primarily used in Northwest Europe from October 1944, and it was also used in Italy in 1945. Vehicles such as the Archer and the Achilles actually were self-propelled anti-tank guns and were operated by the Royal Artillery rather than the Royal Armoured Corps. Post-war, the Egyptian army received about 200 ex-British Archers after the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, and some were successfully used against Israeli armour in 1956. And the Archer also served with some elements of the Royal Armoured Corps in the British Army of the Rhine up until the early 1950s. Well, that's everything I want to say about the Archer self-propelled 17 pounder. Thank you for getting to the end of the video and listening to me bang on about this armoured vehicle. Look forward to talking to you soon about another tank, artillery piece or armoured vehicle, and until then I hope you stay well and we'll talk soon. Thanks.